So today we will be building a React chat app using React, Tailwind CSS and Firebase as a backend. So to start with the project, we can type in the command npx create React app, and the name of the app is chat app. You can give any name you want. It's not mandatory you should give the same name. So this will create a basic setup for a React app, and it may take some time. So during that, I'll just give you a quick overview of what React is. So everyone knows that for to create web applications, you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the basic things you need to know before starting web development. So the people over at Facebook, they just combined all these three into a single library called React, and which is now used very much in the industry for UI components to build the UI really fast and really quick. So this was a library which was developed by Facebook, and they literally changed their entire website. They brought down their website and completely recoded it with React to show its power. So that's what React basically is. So now, while our project is getting started, we'll set up our Firebase requirements. So go to Firebase, console.firebase.google.com. You'll be prompted to this page. Log into your account, and you can create applications, Firebase applications. So Firebase is basically a backend tool which is provided by Google. It provides you backend functionalities like database, real-time databases, authentication, storage permissions, etc. And it's really simple to use. So just click on this add project, give a project a name. So I'll say React Chat app. Click on continue. I'm going to disable this analytics, create the project. This will take a few seconds. Firebase really makes it very simple to use backend tools and work with the backend. And basically, um, Firebase follows a NoSQL database, which means it has something called collection. Inside each collection, you can have multiple documents, and inside each document, you can also have another collection. So basically, this collection basically refers to a table in an SQL database, and this documents basically refers to what we call record in a SQL database. So you can remember this terminology so that you can understand how this works. Here we don't have any uh, relations like primary and foreign key relationships. We can directly create a collection inside a document, so that generally creates a relation like simple relations. That's what a quick overview of Firebase was. So your project is ready on the Firebase project. You can click continue, and it will load your application here. So since we are creating a web app, we can click on this symbol which says web, and we can initialize our app. We can provide it a name again. Add Firebase hosting. I'll show you this time. I didn't show Firebase hosting last time, so I'll be showing it this time. Register your app, and if you're using Firebase for the first time, then you basically need to run this command on your terminal to install Firebase tools. This is a prerequisite. I have already installed it, so I'm not going to install it again. Click next and continue to console. Now your project is set up. This is taking much more time than I thought. So let's set up whatever we need. We need just again two things: authentication and Firebase data store. So for authentication, I'll be using again Google Authentication today. We'll be looking into other authentication later in other videos. So I'll select Google here, enable it, select give an email and save. And this will allow us to have Google Authentication in our application. Um, so this is set up now. The next thing we need is this Firestore database to store our chat messages here. This project will not be a one-to-one messaging functionality. There will be no one-to-one messaging functionality. This will be a general simple messaging app where you can multiple users can send messages and you'll be able to see each other's messages. Soon I'll be releasing another video on one-to-one messaging with the one-to-one messaging functionality. So this will set up our cloud Firestore. So if I refresh, and so this is our basic database here, and we have done our authentication also. So yeah, our project is ready. So we can move on to here. Our Firebase is also set up. So this will move into our project and say code dot to open Visual Studio in the project directory directly. I can close this terminal now. I don't need that anymore. So this will provide us as a basic template, and we can start with our project here. So basically, this is a source directory, which is basically the most important directory in React. Everything we write will be inside this src directory. Here are a few files we don't need. They are app.css, as we will be using Tailwind CSS. We don't need this app.css here. We can remove this app test.js. We can remove logo.svg and setup test.js. Delete it. Move to recycle. Okay. And in app.js, we can remove these two imports, and we'll remove all this entire header, and just have an h1 saying chat app. Also remove this for now. Save it. Uh, and I think we can just start with our project. So to start your project, open the terminal. You can go to new terminal, or else press Ctrl J and it will open up the terminal, and just type npm start and press enter. This will open up the browser in localhost 3000, and your application will be ready there. So it's starting the development server now. And it's taking too much time today. And here we go. We have our chat app here. So before starting to code, I'll also like to connect with Tailwind CSS. So go to browser, type React Tailwind CSS, and this is the link that you want to click. Here you can see the Tailwind CSS configurations. Here are multiple documentations. You can read it to understand. So first, we already created a React app, so we don't need this. We can directly run this command to install our Tailwind CSS. Sorry, yeah. I'll open another terminal for installing packages. Just copy paste this, run it. Tailwind CSS will be installed. After that, you can initialize the Tailwind CSS using this command. Let this be installed, and that's done. So then run this command, and it will create a Tailwind config file in your directory here. So after that, we can start with it. So here we see a Tailwind config file is created. That's it for installation. Now we need to set up that file. So we can just come down in the Tailwind config file. You see this statement here. Copy that, paste it inside contents. So this basically tells Tailwind that you can access all the files inside the src directory which has JS, JSX, TS or TSX extension. So only those files will have access permission, and the Tailwind will be applied only on those files. Next, we need these utility classes. Basically, these classes have the actual CSS written inside them, and class names are provided, and we can use those class name to apply the respective CSS. You can copy this and paste this inside index.css. Remove everything and just paste this. So now, if Tailwind CSS is set up correctly, once we refresh our application, restart our server, we will see that this chat app has become a simple paragraph text instead of a H1 text. So if I just start this again, close this one, let it start. I guess it will take some time because I'm using my personal hotspot here. And you can see the H1 tag is now looking like a simple paragraph tag. And that's what Tailwind CSS does. It strips off the entire default CSS which was applied on every element, So now I just put this on the right side so that you can see the output while we are coding. And I can show this and yeah, just delete, yeah. So one more thing I had to do was to connect our application to the Firebase application we created. So to go to Firebase and click on the setting button, go to project setting, scroll down, you will see our web application here. Scroll down and click on config and just copy this config code. Go to your application and inside the src directory, create a file, JS file. You can name it anything. I'm going to name it Firebase. Paste this here, save it. So now your application is ready to connect with our Firebase that we created in the backend, and we can use the functionalities as and when we require that. So first, I'm going to do the authentication part first, so that we can have a user logged in. So now I'll remove this h1 and just open a JSX fragment. This basically means it tells React that we are going to write some JavaScript code here. So I'm gonna simply say create a user here first of all, so that we can keep track of a user. So by default I say false, the user is false, so there is no user. And here I say if there is no user, I want you to show the login page. else show the home page. So now this is a ternary operator in JavaScript. It just simply means that if there is no user, this exclamation means not. So this means no. If there is no user, then you show the login page, and if else, you show the home page. So before saving this file, I'm going to create those. I'm going to create two folders inside our src folder called components and pages. It's not necessary you have these two, but I like to always create these two so that they are in a well structured manner. When the application scales up, if it is not in a structured format, then it will be very confusing for us to figure out where the error is. So inside the pages, I'll create the login page first, .js, and I type in rfce. This is a snippet that will provide you the basic template for React application. If you are not able to do that, go to extension, search for this ES7 plus React Redux snippet and install this, and then you'll be able to do that snippet work. And then I'll just import this. So if in order to import anything, any element, you just click on the at the end of the element and press Control space, and it will show you this path. So that from there you need to import this. That's the correct path. So I just press enter, and it will be auto imported here. Now I'll create the home page, and here is the home page. Again RFC, save it and import it here. So now since we have here the user as false, so by default this condition will be true, so it will show me login page if I save this. So once I save this, just watch this. Yeah, we are in the login page now. So our login page will be simple. I'll be having just a heading and a button there. So this will be my chat app and a button saying sign in with Google. And this will be having a text of 4XL and a font bold. So 4XL simply means the size of the text, so it will be a bigger text now, and I want it to be bold, so I would say font bold. So these are called Tailwind utility classes which we are applying. So if you hover on any property, you can see what actual CSS is being applied there. So for this text 4XL, it applies the font size of 2.25 rem and line height of 2.5 rem. And for font bold, it simply writes font weight of 700. And now I can style the button. I'll say VG blue of 400, or sorry, or 500 maybe. Text should be small and font should be bold, and text should have a color white. And then I want the borders of the button to be a rounded LG. And then maybe I can also say when you hover on the button, I want it to scale up. Basically, it will become a bigger size, 210. And I want this transition, whatever transition, because from this initial size to a big size, the transition should be have a duration of 200 milliseconds, so it should take 200 milliseconds of time. And I say ease in and out, which will make it a really smooth transition. I forgot the padding, so I'll say a padding of 3. And now if I hover over it, you see the smooth, it just scales up very smoothly, and that's a really good user experience to have. And I'll say margin top of 5 so that it doesn't stick with this title. And for this entire div, I can say the text should be in center so that it centers it. And I want a margin top of maybe 80 so that not 80, maybe 76. No, there's no 76, there's 72. And that will be in the center. So now we can actually add the functionality of signing in with Google, and it's really simple with Firebase. Firstly, you need to create those objects that you require, basically the auth object and a provider. So for Google authentication, you need a Google provider also. So first let's import whatever we need. So I need something called as, oh, before importing, I forgot one thing, that we need to install Firebase inside our application. So just write the command in the terminal npm I firebase, and this is a quite big package and it will take some time to install. So we need to wait for some time, or else let it continue. We'll just import things and just not remember not to save this file, otherwise it will throw errors. It can't throw errors like it can't find the module Firebase. So Firebase has this thing and function called initialize app, which is basically used to initialize our Firebase app inside this application. So I can say Firebase slash app, going to install it from here. Sorry, import it from here. The next thing we need is a get auth function, which is used for providing authentication services. So I can say Firebase slash auth. And also this will have another function called Google Auth provider. This is a Google provider. So for authentication purpose, we only need so much. It's not yet installed. And we can now begin with initializing our apps with this config file that we got from our Firebase. We can pass in this initialize app, the config we created here. So this will now basically initialize our app, and then we need to create certain objects, some objects, one for auth, where we get this, call this get auth function. This will provide us with the authentication service, and we need the provider. So we say const provider equal a new Google Auth provider. Now we have initialized them, and we need to use them in our login page. So for doing that, we need to export it from here, this page. So we write export, and we say we export auth and provider from this page. Is it installed? Yes, it is installed. So maybe now hitting the save button. Google Auth provider. Okay, Google Auth provider is a capital P here. Yeah, now it's done. So we have set up a Firebase for authentication now. We'll be adding a database object also here, but later, not now. So I can go to my login page, and I can simply create a function for login here. So I can say const sign in user will be an arrow function, and inside this I'll be calling sign in with pop-up. Basically, that's the function that you need to call for signing in your user with Google Authentication. So it will pop up that Google screen that you see with multiple your user IDs, and you can select the user ID which you want to log in the user. And this requires this auth object and the provider object that we created in our Firebase file just now. So before that, let me just import these things. I'm not getting the IntelliSense. I don't know why I'm not getting the IntelliSense for them. So sign in with pop-up is from Firebase slash auth, and we have this auth object and our provider from dot slash Firebase. And now this would return as a promise. A promise is basically something, a function that would take some time to execute. We may have some code in our application which will take some time to execute. So, and then it will return something. So that's what promise does. It waits for the function to complete and then returns the whatever value the function returns. So we can like use a dot then here and write some code which will be executed when once the user is successfully signed in. And we also have this dot catch function which will be used to throw some errors. If there is any error that happened while the user was getting logged in, then it will throw that error and we can catch the error here. So now in this case, I don't want anything to be happening on the then, but Just to make sure there is no error, I'll also throw and catch the error and display it with an alert message. And that's the one line of code that you need for Google authentication. You can simply now call this function on this button click. So I can on click say sign in user. And now as we have already set up authentication in our Firebase, this will work as expected. So if I click sign in with Google, nothing's happening. Why? Mm-hmm. Alright, it's not happening. Am I getting any errors? There are no errors. Let me just inspect it once to see any errors. No, there are no errors. But then this sign in with Google is not showing me the pop-up. Here I have done authentication and it is Google authentication is enabled. Yeah. Am I missing something in my code? On click sign in user, does the sign in with pop up? Okay. Was that right sign in with pop up? Let me just check that once. Whether I written this correctly. Sign in with pop up. Now it shows me this IntelliSense dot comma provider dot catch error alert with the error dot message. And if I now click, even now it doesn't show me this. Is it showing some other things? No. Why am I not able to see this pop up? Oh, on this click and sign in user, then this function will trigger a sign in with pop up. So that should work as of now. I'll just do one thing. I'll just stop this application, run it again, just to make sure that everything was alright. Um, mistaken Firebase, get out, okay. No Google Auth provider, that's also good. Initialize app as Firebase config, that's good. And export outcome of provider, okay. And then here we have this auth provider from Firebase and sign in pop-up from Firebase auth. Mm, everything looks good. And not okay. Let's wait till it runs the application. That's done. But then, yes. So there was some small things happening at the back end which was not able to trigger this. So now we can see this and I can log into my account. And once I log in, I've successfully logged in because I didn't get any alert messages as I used the dot catch in my sign in method. It didn't show any alert, which means I am logged in successfully. But we should get some visually effect to see that. But here's nothing because we didn't do anything. Here you can see that on the app.js we have to made this user false. And this user will be always false, and that's the reason why we are always seeing the login page. But if you open up the Firebase and go to authentication and refresh this, and you'll see a user logged in here. So now we have a user, but we have not connected our user to this variable, and that's the reason why we are not able to see the home page. So now to connect this, we can use this library called React Firebase hooks, which is a really handy library to work with Firebase, and it's for Firebase v9. So you can just install this, copy this command, install it, and you can get a real-time listeners. A real-time listeners are nothing but a function that sits on your application and sits between your application and Firebase. In this case, Firebase, and they just look for changes happening, and if any changes happen, and then they get fired. So here we can say, instead of this, we can say user in parent box bracket, because the hook that I'm about to use is a React Firebase hooks from React Firebase hooks, and it will use this used for adding a real-time listener to our auth object. So I can say use, if I just move into this React Firebase hooks and scroll down, you will see this authentication hooks. In that, you can see this use auth state. This is the one we are going to use now for keeping track of the user. So we can say use auth state, and it needs an auth object which we just created in a Firebase file. I'll just import this use auth state also from React Firebase hook slash auth. And now you see our application took us to home page, because as soon as this page got loaded, now it saw in the Firebase, there is Firebase, sorry, yeah, it saw that Firebase has a user logged in, and the status of the user was logged in, and that's why it triggered this function useAuthState and changed the value of user. And now we have some user here, so that's why we are seeing the home page instead of a login page. So that was Google authentication with a very simple way with Firebase. Now we have completed with a login page, so we can move on to our home page. Firstly, let's create the header for the home page. This header will again be very simple. I'll create this entire the components folder, and again RFCE. This will be very simple. Just has a, I can import this here. Import that header. I will have a h1 which says again my chat app, and an image tag which will show the user image. So as since we have already done with our authentication, we can track get a user object here by just using the same auth state and then just passing it here. So this user has multiple objects. So when I type here user and say dot, you can see it has something called display name, which is the username which your user provided when you are creating the Google account. The user email, we can get the email verified, a lot of things. And this photo URL is basically the profile pic of the user in his Google account. So we are going to use that. But I'm going to just say it a question mark here. This question mark is called optional chaining in JavaScript, which simply means if there is no user present, because when the application initially loads, the user will be empty because the use auth state would not have been fired yet. So in that case, if there is empty and you directly use the dot operator, then we will get some error in the page, and we don't want the users to see the errors. So just putting a question mark will like handle that error simply. And I say photo URL, and here I'll just give a name, and class I'll say the height of the image should be 10 and the width of the image should also be 10, and it should be a rounded full so that it will be a complete circle, and I want the cursor to be a pointer. So if I save this, nothing is happening because I didn't save my home page here, and so I save the home page, you can see that my Google profile image is here. I didn't add any image and that's why it's showing this image. So now we can add the sign out functionality. First we can design this header first. So I'll say this class name is text. The font should be 3XL in size and the font should be bold. And the color of the text should be blue 400. And this image is okay, right? Now this entire div, and to make it more optimized, we can say instead of this div, since we know this is the header and we have a header tag in HTML, we can use that header tag, and we can say here this is a flex so that it goes in a single row, items to be center so that they are aligned in a single straight line, and I want this both of them to be justified between so that they are at the two corners of the page, justified between. I'll also provide a padding of 5 and a shadow of large to the header so that it is popping up. And now the most important thing to perform here is uh, I'll say the header is sticky so that it is sticking and top 0 so that whenever the messages go beyond the screen and you scroll, the header will always be on the screen and it sticks to the top of the screen, since I mentioned top 0. And then I need to mention the background color as white because when you say sticky and you scroll down, by default the color becomes transparent, but we don't want that transparency here. I say BG white and I say this header should be displayed above all the other elements in the screen. So I say Z index of 10. And I think that will be it for the header, and yeah, we can now do the sign out functionality. So that's very simple. So I go to the image tag and I say an attribute on click, and I just say I want this to like go inside the auth and perform the sign out operation. And this should be actually not a simple function, it should be a arrow function. So now we got back because we did it, we wrote this as a normal function and we click save. So this, what happens is whenever you call some function which has this parenthesis, then what it does is it calls it automatically without being clicked. So for that reason, we need to make it an arrow function here by saying this. And now it won't be triggered like that. So if I sign in now, it should take me to the home page, yeah. And now it doesn't go back because it knows that only on click I need to perform this. So if I click this, it takes me back to the login page. And now the login functionality is done, so we can go to some awesome chat messages part. So for that, this is the header. So I'll create a div here, mention it as the messages, or instead I can say the body, which contains the messages and the input tag to type in the message and send. So I'll create a div here, which will basically mean this entire application below the header, entire part below the header, and then we can create two more div, one div for messages and another div for the input. So here We'll for temporarily we'll have a h1 saying messages, and I can just spam it for now. And then we can first concentrate on this input part. So I can say here it has a input tag. Let's say the placeholder says enter a message, message, and you can see it pops up here. And it also has a button saying send. All right, and you can now style this thing, these two. So before styling, one thing I need to make sure I want to know do that is the header takes the full part, but the messages and the send input message I don't want to take the entire screen, but maybe have some part of the screen and align it to the center. So to do that, I'll go to this main div, and here I say style it saying the max width for this will be 3xl, sorry, 3xl, and I want it to be centered. So I say mx auto. So mx is basically in the x-axis. I want the margin to be auto, so it is like it's equivalent to saying margin left auto and margin right auto. So basically it does the same thing behind the scene. So when I hover on mx auto, it says that it applies in margin left auto and margin right auto. So if I save this, you can see the messages are shifted here. You can't see it in the small screen, but in a bigger screen, you'll be able to see that. Or maybe I could say just a 2x, sorry, 2xl, and now that's perfect what I want. And this div, I also say it has a margin top of 5 so that it doesn't stick to the header. That's done. And now here, what we can do is style this first. So I can say a class name, and I want this input to also stick to the bottom of the screen. So I'll say it is sticky to the bottom 0. Mhm. Okay, it's not happening because this div is actually a child of this div, and this div as of now has no content to go below, so it only covers so much of the part of the screen, and that's why it's still stuck over here. So once we put some messages here and add this, it will come down automatically. Yes, or we can also say instead of sticking, if I try fixed, it will go down. So fixed to the bottom, maybe not too much down, give it some space for breathing. And I can say the width is around something 96 maybe, and it doesn't apply. Okay, it doesn't apply nothing. I could also say that to display everything in a flex where the items are center and justify it between with a space in the x-axis of 2. So now you can see that they are split up, and this is not looking good because the input tag is only taking so much space and we have a lot of space between that. So fix that. What we can do is go to the input tag and just say the class, apply the class of flex1, and it will take the entire available room. So now we can see it takes the entire room. So flex1 simply means You occupy how much of a space you can. And now that's done. And this ugly outline is not looking good. So I'll just say this outline as none so that when we click on an input, we don't see that output. But now we are not able to see the input at all properly. So we can say that the background should be a gray of 100 or maybe a 200 and provide it a padding of 3 with rounded large so that the borders are rounded. And now you can see it's a much better. And for the button, I can see that the background is a green 400 with the text small and text color should be white and the font should be bold. Save that and that's the thing. So I can say padding of 3 and a rounded edge, and on hovering I want it to scale to a smaller size and I want it to transition this make this transition in 200 millisecond with ease in and out. So that's how it will look now, and now it's a much better thing to see. Yeah, all right, so we are done with this input. Now we can also like keep track of what the user enters on the input using the state. So you can state variable, and React has this concept a hook called useState, which is basically used to create a a temporary variables, store data temporarily. It's not a normal variable because whenever some changes happen to this variable in a use state, React knows it should re-render something on the page. So that's a special functionality, but it's temporary because whenever you refresh, whatever you have written inside or stored inside the state vanishes. And that's why it's called as temporary storage. So the syntax to write this is create a use state variable is you say const and you then destructure an array with two values. One is the variable name and another is a setter function which will be used to set this variable. And you say use equal to use state and you import use state from React and you mention a default value. I say it's empty string. Now like in general JavaScript you can't just say input equals something. Instead, you need to use the setter method that you have declared here to access this input or to change the values in this input. So now that we created that, we can map it to our input. We can say here the value of this input box is actually input, and this input is actually the variable that we created. But now if I save this and I click here and I type, there's nothing happening because nothing is shown in the text box. That's because we have initialized this value to an empty string, and now we are saying that the input tag has a default value of input, and this input is basically an empty string. So no matter what we type, this input value will always be an empty string. But we don't want that. We want the user to type in the input box, so we can like have another attribute called onChange. So this is fired whenever the user types something in the input box, and it provides us with an event which will have the value that is entered by the user. So we can say here we set the input. So basically change the input value to whatever the value that is present inside this input tag. So now if we type, we can see it's coming up. And if you have to check whether it is stored inside this input, we can just see a console log of this input, figure it out, inspect it, go to console, clear it out. Those are previous errors, some errors. And now if I type hello, you can see it triggers on each and every element and it adds it. And last we get this hello word, which the user has typed. So now we have successfully mapped our state variable to our input tag. So now we have track of this user input. Now what we can do is at first I say before we do this, we'll change these messages. So now I don't want to print these messages here. I'll create a component called message, and I'll create it inside a component where we can, oh sorry, not JD, JS, and give RFCE to create that. Import this message here, and this message I want basically three things. One will be a paragraph tag saying the sender name. Below that, we'll have another paragraph tag saying the message, and below that, we'll have a paragraph showing the time of the message. So these are the three things which will be displaying in a message, and we can just style it now. So this paragraph, I say the text should be small. Okay, and then we can say for this the class message. I think the default styling will be good enough, and for time I say the text should be extra small as of now. So this will be this. This will be our message component. Second, and yeah, one more thing, I want this time to always be at the right side. So I say text right. Now it goes beyond that because this div will take the entire width of the screen. So I can say that the max will, okay, we can say the width will be fit the content inside. So now it moves here. And as of now, I can provide a background color of blue 400 with a padding of 2, and I want the borders to be rounded except for the, okay, now it's, let this be the message. So this will be a message will be popping up when we send a message. So also one thing I can do is I make this relative and make this name absolute and say top of negative top. So it will be coming up, and I want it to be -3. What does that do? Maybe 6. Fine. Okay. So I want this to show up above the message. Oh, that's enough for now. Styling this. Now, firstly, let's add the functionality of putting in the message. So whenever you type the message and press the send button, we want to add the data to the database, and then we can fetch from the database and display the messages here. So now we'll add the first functionality of adding this. So we have the input here. We can track. We have the user message in this input now. We can also get the user instance here. So we can say user equal use auth state of auth, so that we can get this username, and for time we can use the server timestamp function provided by Firebase. So to add the document, firstly we need a database reference here. So we can say here we can create a reference, say const db equal get firestore is the function, and we can import this from firebase slash firestore and export this db from here so that we can access it in other files. So that's the end with the firebase .js file. Now here we can create a function called send message, which will be an arrow function. And inside this, we can write the logic for sending the data to the Firebase first. So that's really simple. That's again a one function call, and you can complete the task of sending your message to a database and basically storing it in the database. So we have this function called add doc, which is provided by the Firebase Firestore. And this you can see here, it requires a reference, collection reference first, and then the data. So to provide the collection reference here, we can say the collection method again, collection function, and we can pass in this collection function requires two things: the Firebase Firestore we are referring to, and the path of the Firebase collection. So first we pass in our DB, which we created just now in our Firebase file, and then I'll simply pass in a collection called chats. So what this add doc does is it checks for this chat. If it doesn't get any reference, it will create a chats. Um, it will create the chats for the user. And so after this, I want the data to be put inside this chats collection is firstly the sender who is the user logged in. So I say user to just optional chaining to just protect the data, and I say display name. So whatever username was created, user display name returns, that's the sender name. Then we have the message, which would be basically the input, and we have the time. So you can put your current time from the PC, but the thing is, uh, when in the production environment or in development, sometimes a user can be using the other application from different time zones. So in order to maintain a proper time zone, we can use the server time zone time. So this is a function server timestamp, which is provided by Firebase to keep track of that. So now I can say this add doc is also returns a promise. So we can use our dot then here and say when you return, when you return in the sense if you are successfully added the document, first thing you do is set this input to empty string. So it will come back to an empty string. So you won't see the message here. So after that, as of now, I'll leave it as it is, and then I'll catch if you get any error while doing this. I want you to alert that error with the message. So now this function should be working perfectly. So if I say on click and I say send message, I think it should work. So let's try it. Of course, you won't see any changes in the UI, but when you go to the Firebase, you can check in the Firebase and it should add the data. So if I say hello guys and I send, we'll wait for see after a few seconds the message went because this happened. So which means this was successful. So if I go to the Firebase data store now, you will see a chats option, a chats collection. Inside this, we have one document with this chat ID. So this is the ID of this document. So as you can remember, if you know SQL databases, you must have learned this primary key, which is unique for each record in a table. Similarly, here we have this ID, which is unique for each document, and this is generated by Firebase. This is some random ID generated by Firebase itself. And we have this hello guys. Sender name is Chris because that's the account I logged in, and this is the server time at which it was sent. So that did work properly. And I found one more thing that even if there is no message, the send button is clickable. So if you click it now and go to our database, you see there is another document with an empty message coming in. But this is not a good practice. So one thing we can do is we can protect our button by saying it is disabled. We have an attribute called disabled, and I can say if there is no input. So this negation means no. So no input. If there is no input, then I want it to be disabled. But the button is not getting disabled. So if I click it, does it add another document? No. So I didn't add another document here. This was the old document we was created. So in order to like visually see that this button is disabled, we can also write something inside of Tailwind CSS. It has this something called disabled. Tailwind CSS provides us with something called disabled. And if it is disabled, we can say the BG should be gray to 100. And oh my god, that's really bad. I can say 100. Oh, okay, 200. So the button is disabled, and as soon as I type even a single letter, it turns green. So now that's one optimization. I think when it is disabled, okay, when it is disabled, I can say that when it is disabled, the cursor not allowed. Cursor should be not allowed. So when I hover now, it clearly shows that you can't click this button. But when I type something and I come here, I can click. So this is one optimization technique. So just to be sure, I'll just delete this document from here, not the collection, but the document, because it's an empty message. It serves no purpose. So now, sorry, we have one document here. All right. So now what we can do is we can fetch these documents which we are sending and display it to the user. So just right after this, what we can do is we can write a use effect. So basically use effect, it is again a hook in React. The specialty is that it runs only when some condition is true, and you can pass this condition inside this array. This array is called dependency array. If you keep it empty, which means that it should run only once when the application renders or the page renders, and if you pass something inside this, it would call this function whenever that particular variable changes. So now I can say inside this is effect, or else let's try this without use effect by using a real-time listener using the package that we installed, and that package is basically the package called React. Oh, where is it? Package yeah, React Firebase hooks. This package, it provides us with also hooks for accessing databases. So if we go here, instead of this clicking on here Cloud Firestore hooks, we can click on Cloud Firestore hooks, and we have this use collection and we have use document. Use collection is basically used for fetching multiple documents from a single collection, or basically the entire collection, and use document is for fetching a specific document, and it provides us with data directly. So if you go down and you see use collection, and you see this is the syntax. So it provides us the sharp note and also a loading and an error state. We can use them. So we can use this loading and show some loaders if required. Other, and we have the query with the options. All right. So let's try that use collection now. In the last video, we have used an on snapshot function, which is a real-time listener provided by Firebase itself. So let's try this out. And these hooks cannot be written inside a use effect or some function. It should be an independent hook. So here I say, as we saw, a snapshot, right? Snapshot, we can name it anything. So I'll just take it, name it messages, and I'll also add this loading as of now, and I say we use collection function. No IntelliSense, that's bad. So we can import use collection from React Firebase hook slash Firestore. And now if you see this, it says it needs a query and options, which is optional. So I can pass in this query, which is provided by Firebase Firestore, and I can say query the collection from this database called the chats on, and order them based on the timestamp, and I want them in the descending or CDB ascending. I say ascending. Let's see order. So if I say console log this messages, what am I getting here? I got a snapshot. Snapshot docs length 1 data. Oh my god. So it has a single document now because what we did is we added only one document inside this. So now in order to render this out, we can simply say instead of printing a single message, I use again a JSX and say loop through messages. So I say messages question mark dot, just for optional chaining, just to protect our data, map messages to map through each message, and I want an implicit return. So implicit return is you use a parenthesis, and if you use curly braces you need to mention this return keyword here, but in latest versions you can directly return it by using a curly parenthesis, and you say message. And now since it is looped through, you need its a key prop need to be added to this, so that whenever there is a re-render or when you delete a message or you update a message, React knows that it does not have to re-render the entire list of all the messages, but instead it should only render the recent message or the updated message. I can say here message.id. Alright, okay. So before this, let me just check it once. Say messages of 0.id, and it shows cannot read properties of undefined reading ID. Alright, so okay, let's check out how this returns. Is there any example for this? Yes, we have an example. Okay, and error loading value dot docs dot map. Okay, doc, and we can provide it doc dot id. All right, so I was right. So this basically returns an array, so this should have like a dot docs dot map, and then we can, what about the data? So we can say doc dot data. Okay, it's very similar to Firebase thing. We'll also pass in the sender, which is basically the message dot data dot sender, we have the message itself, which is message dot data dot message, sorry, not comma, dot, and lastly we have the time, which will be a message dot time dot. We convert the time sent by the server to a date and then get the time from that. So now this message.id, this thing can be to this component, which can be used here by simply saying props, or now we can use destructuring and say you have this, uh, we have sender message and time, so we can say sender message and a time, and directly use those dynamic values here. Instead of this arc hold value, we can say sender. Instead of this message, we can say message. Oh, sorry, inside this message. And for the time, we can also say time. What happened? Time did not get passed. Message dot. Okay, so this is basically message dot data dot time. Data dot time. So this is the timestamp that we are getting it. First, we'll fix that. To fix that, we can use a library that we used in the last video, which is called moment.js. This is basically a library to like format your dates, your time, your calendar, multiple locale support. It has a lot of things, but we'll be using it to like change that time into a proper format which the user can understand. So we can install this, let it get installed. Get it installed, yes. So it got installed, and I can say in this message here, instead of just time, I can say moment pass this time, and I can say dot format it to LT, which will just convert this number into this, which is a nicer format for us to remember. So I can also say here the font should be like a semi-bold, right? And that's it as of now. So here, now we have this. Just wondering because this name is getting not enough flex because of the width constraint that I given. Um, okay, let it be as it is. We'll see some way to figure it out later. So now we have the messages coming in. Now we just need to make sure that the sender messages are going to the coming to the right and it is in blue color background, and the receive and then other user messages are coming to the left with a gray background. So now to do that, it's really simple. We have already done the most of the part for that too now, since we have the sender in our database. So what we can do is make this backtick so that we can pass in dynamic values. And here I can get a user from the use auth state Firebase and pass in the auth. Yeah, I forgot the equal to here. So now we have the user here, so we can say that I can make a condition saying that if the sender from that we passed here is equivalent to the user dot display name, then I want you to apply these stylings here, and else I want you to apply the same styling but with just a gray thing. So now it doesn't show anything here because it is sender as a sender message, and I say this blue. I say margin left of auto for this so that it goes to the right of the div, and I can see that it has a padding of 4 instead of a 3. Oh, sorry, not here. So now it comes to the right side. Now I need to just, I think I can just log into another account here. Say localhost 3000. Oh, okay. It logged me into the same account because this application is running here, so I can open the Brave browser. Say localhost 3000, and it asks me to sign in. So I click sign in. What's happening with this? Why is it not picking up? Firebase error or pop-up is blocked. Okay, so pop-up is blocked. All right. So basically, this would do it. I'll show it after the completion of this project. So now, if you see this, we can actually maybe send this a bit left or right. So where did that go? Input here. This entire div I can say from left you move around 96, and that would be enough, I guess, for now. So I can send another message, say how are you doing. So I send it and it comes here. Alright, so that's one mistake, or maybe not a mistake, a bug, which is they are sticking up together. So I didn't add a margin top to this div, so I can say a margin top of 4 or even 10. 10 is too much. 8, okay, 8 is good. Here also I can add a margin on top of it because that's the same styling for both the users. And here it shows, because the message is a bit lengthier, width of it, and I can say a minimum width of maybe a 200 pixel. Sorry, minimum width of a 200 pixel. If I mention that, maybe 200 pixel is too big. 100 pixel minimum width. Oh no, 120. Yeah. So now it fixed that. So I can say If the message is too small, the minimum width of this should be a fit 120 pixels. So that now this message is coming in properly. This looks good. And one more thing I can add is that I can remove this top right roundness. So I can say rounded top right none. So it will more look of like a message, and for the receiver I can say rounded top left none. So that will do that as of now. Oh, this looks really good now. One more thing we need to add is that, so I can show you the header is stuck to the top, right? So even if you scroll down, it should not go beyond that. So we can say here, maybe just to show you that. So it goes below this. Now if I scroll up, you can see the header just sticks there. And if I send another message, you can scroll up and this header sticks to the top. And that's what we wanted. Now this thing goes below this. So it should probably not go below the input message. That's a good thing. And we can just see here, not in this message. I think the message part is done. We can just style it around here. So one thing for this messages I can say is the class is has a padding 5 so that it doesn't stick to the corner. Now in this side inside this div, after the messages are displayed, I want another div that has a class name of margin bottom of 10, and now will you see a concept of use ref hook. So we have this um, use ref, which you can see here. Use ref. So yeah, it allows you to persist values between renders. So it's also a variable which you can use to store data. So you can use that here. So you can say the name can be this. This is because when you have something going beyond this input tag, I want you to scroll up automatically. So what I can do is I just say here a name is last message day, and I use this use ref, and initially it is null, but later when the page loads, I want you to assign this div with this reference called this last message div. So use ref, basically what it does is it just a pointer. It basically points to an element that you assigned it to. So this message div will now have a reference of this div basically. So what I want to do is after you add successfully a document, I want you to call a function. I'll create a function here. Scroll to bottom, and inside this I can just say that last message div dot current dot scroll into view, and this function takes something called behavior, I guess, and behavior I want it to be smooth. All right, I think that's the perfect thing. And after setting the input, I also want you to call this scroll to bottom function. So basically, I think each time a message gets added, I want you to call this. So now you can see there is some gap between this and this. So if I type here now, did it work? Just to check for this message and I hit enter, it did work. It did work because it moved automatically, it scrolled automatically to down. Alright, so that worked. Actually it worked because it scrolled down, but it took like smoothness. The smoothness is not happening. Did I miss out some spelling here? So if I just uh, no, that's correct. All right, but it's happening. But it's scrolling down. That's what we wanted, and that's happening. Nextly, what I can do? Yes, it worked. That's all right. So now, so you see this. This is the thing that I told you. Not round it off, so that you can have a feel of a message coming up here. Nextly, I think we're done with this. We can send message, we can sign in, we can sign out, we can send message, and that is also done. Yeah, this messages can be displayed in a much smoother manner, just like another library, a simple library from React called React Flip Move. Can go to this React Flip Move, and this is what it does. This beautiful animation. So you can just install this React Flip Move, and once this installed, we can go to our message component. Instead of making it a function, we can say it as an uh, arrow function. We can say here use sorry, forward ref. Forward ref is something provided by React, and can use it here. See this, and this provides us with something called as a reference. Sample still can be given this reference that we get from this useref. It shows me errors. Okay, so let's see, did I make any syntax mistake here? React, flip move, features, quick start, functional component, props, comma, ref, and there is ref. Okay, that's correct. But why am I getting this error now? Article for ref. Alright, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's correct. And it says component is not a function. So let me just complete this syntax for this. So inside this, I can just wrap this entire thing inside something called a flip mode, which we just installed. And I need to import this flip mode from React flip mode. And now you can see this beautiful animation that plays when our application loads, how cool it is. And it also applies for new messages coming in. So if I type in animation and I send, and you saw how this animation came in. That's a beautiful library to make your application look more smoother and beautiful. Nextly, there was one animation there. That error was thrown because we need to wrap this thing inside a flip mode, which I forgot. And now what we can do is that's it. So that's the entire application that you can sign in, you can sign out. So if I sign out now and I sign in with a different account this time, let's see if our logic has worked properly. I log in with a different account this time and I see all the messages in the background gray and to the left. And now if I had here hi a message and I can send and it comes to the right. So now that's the actual chat functionality that we were expecting. And one more thing we can be done is we can type, it's always easier to type a message and press the enter button to send the message. But now, as of now, we are like clicking on the button. So to make that, it's really simple. Just scroll down, and when you have this div for this input and the button, you just wrap this instead of a div, you can wrap it inside a form, and that will automatically what happens? Form. Oh, sorry, I removed the button here. Sorry. Okay, now it should be triggered with an enter button. So you can say hello and hit enter and it refreshed because by default a form function refreshes the application and we can see the messages rendered here, but we need to prevent that. So we can say whenever form submits we get something called as an event and I represent it as at E, and we can say E dot prevent default to prevent that default behavior of reloading the application. Now it says reload and enter, it comes up immediately. So that you're done with the application. I also wanted to show the Firebase deployment part where you can host your application freely. So we are getting some warnings here. This says that loading is assigned a value but never used, and it's in home.js. So in home.js, wherever I used loading here, this is defined but it's not used. So I can remove that, and then mm, this is not a problem. This is because of that flip mode that we installed here. And did I pass for the user effect? Okay. So if you'll remember, when we set up Firebase, we also checkmark the checkbox for adding Firebase hosting. So since we did that there, we can directly, and we have also installed our Firebase package here. We can directly deploy our application here. So there are a few commands that we need to write. Firstly, we need to log into a Firebase account. So you say Firebase login, and it says logged in as, so no, this is not my account. I want to log in. So I'll just log out. You need to log into the account in which you have created your Firebase project. Now I'll just log in again. And it says allow Firebase to collect. Say type Y and hit enter. It will take you to this. You select the account you want to log in and say allow, and it'll say Firebase CLI successfully logged in. Close that, come back here, and it says you're logged in with this account. And that's correct. So firstly, the first command is now to say Firebase init so that we can initialize our Firebase application. And maybe I'll just drag this a bit up so that you can see it clearly. So first you say, are you ready? So you say yes. Then which feature, Firebase feature do you want to set up now? So we'll say hosting, configure files for Firebase hosting and optionally set up. We say optionally, we don't want that. So here you press, you can move up and down with your arrow keys, and for selecting you need to press spacebar. So I selected this option and hit enter. So it will ask for existing project or a new project. So we say existing project because you have already created a Firebase project in Firebase console. So I hit enter. Now it will ask for you for the project. You need to select the project that you created. So it's React, Chatter, yeah, YouTube. This is the one. I'll select that. Then it will public directory. You must name it build. This is very important. You must name it build. Hit enter. Configure as a single page application. Yes. Set up automatic builds and deploy with GitHubs. I don't want that, so I say no. And now Firebase initialization is complete. So once that is complete, you need to like build a production build. So for that, you need to write npm run build. This will basically strip off all your unnecessary files that your application has, all unnecessary packages and all, and will provide you with a production build or optimized production build. So now, after this is complete, you already here see a build folder created in your application. This is the folder which will be deployed to Firebase when you host it. Um, so let's wait for a few minutes. It will take some time to build it. And once that is done, you can then deploy it to Firebase with a single command saying Firebase deploy. But after that, whenever you make some changes to your code, you have to run this command again, npm run build, and again deploy the application so that the new changes are reflected on your deployed version. So now it says compiled successfully and everything is done. So we can clear this and just say Firebase deploy. Now this will deploy the application and provide us with a URL. So it's hosting all the files and done. So now you have this hosted URL. This is the URL in which your application is now hosted. So to prove that this is my application, what I can do is one thing. I'll just close our localhost, close this, and you can press Ctrl in your keyboard and click on this link and open it. And now this is our application, which is having its own domain. This is the domain that Firebase provides. So you can click sign in, and it will function exactly the same as it did in the development run. So now you see all the messages are popping up. So because now I logged into the previous account, so that's why it's coming here. So we can also here also type this is production, hit enter, and it comes there. So now you can share this link with your friends, or you can put it up in your portfolio, anything, and just enjoy the application. So if you're liking this type of contents, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, and share these videos with your friends if they are interested in this contents. Also leave down comments any future suggestion videos you want me to build. I look forward and do the best I can do. Thank you for watching.